My name's Euan McQueen. I've been in and around railways for over the last 50 years, both as an employee and in dealing with heritage and in advisor and consultant and all sorts of odd jobs. But in 1959 I was on the West Coast for quite a lot during that year, and that was really one of the final years when the old West Coast Railway was still running, in the sense it was almost all steam. In the West Coast, the railway really served everybody in small towns and settlements. The trucking services were just beginning to start developing. And there were days when there's still passenger trains between Greymouth and Hokitika, and the shopping and Friday night train to Hokitika, and between Hokitika and Ross, and the miners' train to Ruanui, and all those sorts of things. They were still running. And the technology of railways then was, in signalling for example, there's one modern bit of signalling between Stillwater and Westport. Centralised traffic control came in 1958, but otherwise it was tablet, which was one of the major means of signalling around New Zealand railways after about 1910, 1920. Or what we called open section. You had a timetable that the train stuck to rigidly. And there were busy lines, all focused on Greymouth. There were 6 railways went out from Greymouth, the railway to in roughly geographic order: Rapahoi, Ruanui, coming around the other way through to Christchurch, of course, through Stillwater to Otira and Christchurch, and from Ngāhiri up the valley into Blackball and Roa, and of course Hokitika Ross going south. So Grey was the focus for that. The big locomotive depot was here, the train running office, the train management office was here. It was staffed 24-hour, 24/7 generally, although there weren't very many trains on Sundays. It was a very busy place, and yet when you look at the population of the coast about that time, it'd be around 30,000, perhaps 35,000. You say, well, why? And it's essentially because it was dealing with extractive industries that produced a lot of traffic. You had coal, big mines at Ruanui with what was up there, Liverpool, and Strongman, which fed into Rapahoi, and the Blackball mine served at Blackball, and Roa just up the road from that it was served directly by rail. And all that came in essentially to the port for shipping to the North Island, because there the cement works, the railway locomotives in the North Island, particularly gasworks, because there's marvellous gas coal came from the coast, and most of New Zealand's gas coal came from Greymouth, a bit from Westport. And there were ships, the K-class ships of the Union Company, the colliers, that scuttled up and down the coast and carried this to various places around New Zealand. So it was busy, but to the extent that on a typical weekday there'd probably be about 70 trains, movements in and out of Greymouth. And if you take the signal box as the sort of focus, and that was the physical control centre, the plotting and planning went on the top floor of the brick building across from the station. If you take the signal box, the signalman there, and there were 3 shifts there, would look after the traffic to and from all these lines, and it all came in through Greymouth past their signal box. And if you added to those 70 or so trains the locomotive movements from the wharf yard, which of course was there, and it was a very busy place because all the traffic, the shipping came in by rail, and any that went out by sea of course, but any that came in tended to be put onto railway wagons and taken across the big goods shed down by the port. And you'd have locomotive movements to and from trains going down to the depot at Ilmalane, about a kilometre south of Greymouth Station. And you added that, then there'd be shunts between the passenger yard by the station, where warehouse is now, and the big yard down at the wharf. There were lots of sidings, and with the big cranes loading the wagons in. And there'd probably be well over 100 movements, taking those into account. And then there'd be work trains, and there'd be special trains, the Friday night special to Hokitika for shopping or going home late from Grey, and the picture train into Hokitika from Ross and back again, and the miners' train up to Ruanui. They're all passenger trains, not freight trains. And most of those trains on the Hokitika line, on the Otira, on the Midland line, and quite a lot to Ruanui carried passengers. but often with freight attached. They were what were called mixed trains, or goods with car. There was a special Wednesday rail car from Otira. It went up from Grey in the morning to Otira and back again for the morning. That was for shoppers, and it went out again in the afternoon. A lot of railway people up there, but people at sawmills and farmers, they'd hop on that train and come down and do their shopping on Wednesdays. So all that movement made up a general pattern of about 70 trains a day, 5 days a week. There were certainly some on Saturdays. Sunday was pretty quiet. There weren't that many in the middle of the night. The trains to and from the Midland, perhaps the odd one from Westport. And the rail cars to and from Westport too. And but that made a very busy station. And I, without doing acres and months of research, judged that Greymouth would have been not far behind the big centres, the main centres, especially Wellington, Auckland, Christchurch, in the number of train movements in a typical 24 hours. It was the next step back, and the only other regional station I can think of it would be Invercargill, which had 8 lines going out from it, branch lines in the 1950s, all with steam haul trains. Not all of them running every day of the week, and not quite the same train density. But that would have been, Invercargill South Box was a pretty big box, and that would have been busy, but I suspect Greymouth had the lead role after the big places like Auckland and Wellington. A very busy focus for a very busy railway. Yeah, the interesting thing is that you say, well, gosh, you know, you look at the number of trains today in the line, you don't see too many trains, but the trains, of course, are very much bigger, 4, 5, 6 times in tonnage what they were then, and the locomotives more powerful. All worked by one man too. And if you actually do some sums, the tonnage off the Hokitika-Ross line, for example, is not far short of what it was when native timber was coming out and livestock and that sort of traffic. But the main traffic is dairy produce and Hokitika plant. And the traffic going through Stillwater is now 2 or 3 times what it was in the 1950s, with the coal from Westport and Reefton and Roa and so on. And there's other traffic, there's timber from Stillwater and other traffics, and they build up to a fairly sizable sum. So although you see a lot fewer trains, there are a lot fewer people involved in running trains. All the train control runs from Wellington, not Greymouth. You actually have a much busier and more productive railway now than you did then. But boy, it was fun watching it in 1950. How's that?
It's good.
Euan, you mentioned about the tablet system, and Dave Ferris keeps talking about the tablet machine. Now, for someone like me, I think that's something you're handed in and out of the train. I'm not sure what is this, because he keeps talking about it'd be great to have a tablet machine in the signal box.
Sure. Well, there was a tablet machine in the signal box, and because the main line was a bit separate from the signal box, it was delivered on a wire, on a hoop, which went across to a pole, and the loco crew picked it up. The tablet itself was a small, round piece of a particular type of fibreboard, and it was labelled for a section, let's say Greymouth to Kaiata, which was a tablet station. And the person who held that little biscuit, it was called, tablet, that train had right of way on that line, the right to occupy that line, and the machines were interlocked in such a way that once that one tablet had been issued for that section, no other tablet could be issued, which meant that you always had just one train on the section at the time. And to my memory, and I've searched around this pretty much, that system was as near fail-safe as you could make it. The only thing would happen would be if a driver deliberately flouted it, and I haven't heard of any instances like that, except one chap who fell asleep many, many years ago, but he was woken up in time.
And so, was that an electronic system, that tablet machine, or mechanical?
Well, it was electrical. It was
Yes.
Mechanical in the sense of the use of the machines, yes. And the approvals were given not by word between machines, but by code of bells. Ding, ding, ding would be, yes, release tablet for section, and so on. There's a whole sheet of about 8 different codes were used, and the staff using it knew those codes well. And the overriding role was that of train control, because he would give approval to release the tablet for the next section. So you had that check above it, and you had the integrity of the loco crew, which was very high on this sort of things. I mean, practical terms their lives were at stake, but they didn't want to spend the next 6 months writing letters, please explain why you did this. And they followed it rigidly and carefully.
Now, in the signal box earlier today, when we were looking in there were different colour levers, and these were all coded, were they, the different colours?
Well, they were coded to help the signalman, in particular, though each one was labelled. Each one had a different function. I don't know enough about that box or the codes to really comment on that, but it was part of a code of practice which was developed from experience over many, many years, and which was pretty standard in the different boxes around the country. There used to be about 150 signal boxes like the Greymouth one in active service. Now there are none of those mechanically in active service, and indeed while there are 4 or 5 signal boxes on the main line in their original positions around the country, they're all there as heritage buildings, not as working models. All signalling now is by radio control and automatic signalling, centralised traffic control, and what's called track warrant control. It's all done by either complete signal control, like centralised traffic control, CTC, or by track warrant, where the driver gets a warrant, he writes out for a section of track, and you cannot go past the end point of that without getting a further warrant.